Welcome to this first look of the Aegis Sabre Peregrine. So let's try our best not to mess up the name too much. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you to my long-term subscribers. So one of the first things I've noticed about this is that it does not have wheels like the 350R, which is one of the only other ships in its class, I would argue, that's kind of geared towards racing. And these larger pads, I really do like them, unlike the wheels on the 350R, which sometimes can cause interesting effects under gravity, where I've personally had it kind of roll off when it gets tapped by something. It hasn't happened that recently. Another thing I noticed about this device, the way it's set up, is the engines. So the way the craft is put together, there's this big kind of armor that's not an armor at the back, that's like this long tail top piece, which kind of blocks the engine flames, which was kind of surprising to me. If it was slightly wider, it would actually help, I would argue, with at least visually its stealth characteristics, which I know is weird, especially with a ship that you'll see in a few minutes has quite a bit of lights on it and such, and is noisy, but it's not visually bright from its engine when it's even in full when you have full thrust running, which is kind of surprising. Another thing I did note is that there is thrusters that are on purpose weaker on the other sides. So its main thruster is rather, there's one of those bright lights, by the way. The main thruster is very strong. Its main thruster is able to take it pretty quick. It's at spoilers. It's at 1448 outside of Atmo at full speed with the thrust with the afterburner on and such. But the point is that its main thruster is the main attraction. It's kind of a drag strip ship, which is kind of shocking considering its wing configuration. It at least looks, with the big scoops and its nice wide wings, it looks like it should be something that's a little more well-rounded. But it does not have any weapons at all. It does have noise and decoys, the usual allotment for a ship of this size. But and it does have two size 1 shields, but it does not have any weapons to speak of. And as I pointed out before, it is a little noisy of a ship when it's moving around at full speed and such, and it does shake in the advanced camera and everything. It's not a very low profile ship, although it does look nice. This is actually my first of the Aegis Sabre Raven series of ships. That's, a Raven that's not a Raven type situation. And I will say that I was hoping that what John Crew said, that the next, basically the next Sabre Raven that's not a Raven was the one everyone was expecting. We were expecting, John, the a Sabre Raven that's slightly different, maybe, if necessary, in looks and maybe slightly less, EMP capabilities or something. But we were expecting a gunboat with a decent amount of stealth with an EMP. And this thing, with its single size one power plant running around, and its para size 1 shields, and its no weapon system, is not quite a Sabre Raven. Especially because, oh yeah, it doesn't have weapons. So it doesn't have missiles. It does not have guns. I want to stress that. That's why I'm going over it again. So if you're expecting something that's well-rounded that you and your buddies can go run around in with, you can run around with this with you and your buddies, don't expect that. And one of the things you do give up is this is an expensive ship for what it is. Now, you have the 350R, which is a cheaper ship. Now, I do have some customizations on it, but I think even with these customizations, it's a cheaper ship, shockingly. And this thing has a bed on board. It has hygiene on board. And honestly, you can get off and log out in this ship. So by its very nature, this vessel has weapons, has shields, has hygiene, has a bed. It does not have the substance like the food storage and everything else like the other ones, like the 325A and the 315P, which are amazing vessels, and they're in a class of their own. But the 350R, it must be noted that it may have a taller silhouette, but it's pretty quick on its own, but it can still fulfill the interceptor role. The Sabre Peregrine is not able to fulfill the the interceptor role that it's based on. The actual frame of this saber, this new saber that I'm going to get out soon and go back to. I'm pointing out it has the same amount of decoys and noise as our other vessel right next to it. But the craft that we are looking at right now, when I get back out of the 350R, it is important to point out it is not able to fulfill the medium interceptor it's based upon. The frame is a medium interceptor, but in name only. You can note once again the hygiene, which is a toilet, and then also you have a bed with the ability to don't forget to log out on that bed. Now, both ships do have this ladder system to get in and out of them. So it is worth noting. I know I'm giving a lot of props to the 350R. I am biased. I love the 300 series, everything but the 300i. But if it had a ramp or a set of steps that was easier to traverse with, say, small packages and such, without having to use that belly storage and everything that the 300 series is famous for, it would be nicer. But that's what it is. I do like when you jump into the Sabre series, when you have the big frame kind of come down on top of you. If you were flying this with sticks and HOTAS configuration and such, it would be interesting to note that capability. It does have the ability to scan. It does have, as I pointed out, decoys and noise. It does have 2 size 1 shields, and it has all the different master modes. So you may be confused, like, why does it have a guns mode? Well, that's so its shields can work. So it does have the limitations and the benefits of those master modes. This is me testing it while it's doing the auto landing, and that was just another excuse for me to get a couple more angles of it, showing it in process, and also test out its landing gears. I like these style landing gears with these flat metal bottoms to them because they're very sturdy, and you can see how they kind of shock absorb nicely there, and they don't roll around. There's no games. And the bigger thing about the shock absorbing style landing gear is well, let's not forget the best of the best is my favorite, the Grasshopper. I named it the SRV. I love my SRV because it has so much downward thrust when you hit the K button and you change over to the VTOL modes. Those massive landing gears just take it in stride, and you can land in weird, awkward positions and still land. So I do want to give a nod that this particular Sabre is going to be able to do, slightly more type of difficult to land locations, like at an outpost, maybe on a ship that you're not necessarily supposed to fit this thing on. You're putting it sideways or at an angle to fit it just right, maybe at the front of an 890 jump, for example, or something, alongside other ships. It won't go rolling around on you, which I really like. So this ship leaving Atmo, within Atmo, etc., is pretty impressive, especially when I remember to put the scroll wheel up and actually get it to full speed and give it its proper boost. And it's just that nice little thrust. And it truly feels like an afterburner, like you're in a fighter jet kind of ripping through the sky in this thing. You can see it shaking and everything else. That's it's just a nice touch. The ship handles okay. It does have a lot of negative acceleration, I guess you'd call it. So if you want to stop, especially in Atmo, with any kind of gravity, this thing is kind of weak on the other thrusters. That main thruster that's pushing you forwards, that's on the back of the ship, has most of the power. It is tuned that way. This thing is basically a drag racer type ship. And I'm not a racing channel. I know there's a lot of great racers, so I know for those, I'll take pointers if anybody wants to put them down in the comments, or if you have your own perspective, if you are into racing and you've tried this ship out, or you want to see, hey, I'm seeing it's looking like this, and I do fly the 350R, and here's what I think. I'm all ears. But it ain't no Fury LX. It's closer to a 350R. I want to set expectations fairly. It's a very expensive ship. It's coming in at the same price as the Firebird, which is a missile boat version of the Aegis Sabre Raven. That is considerable. At 170 USD war bond, 185 USD credit, which is considerable for this ship. Now, full disclosure, I have no intentions of keeping this vessel long term. This is more of just going to be a CCU stepping stone. I actually converted it from a Talon Shrike, and then this will probably become one of my many endeavors in my collection later on for my Endeavor Strategic Reserve project. If you're ever curious, Discord or Reddit, hit me up. I'll give you a nice little rundown and some perspective on the CCU game on anything you like. Or in the comments below if you're okay with it being talked about in public. Always available. So I'm going in, I'm 2 for 1 on this large tower, and we're going to see if I can make it 3 for 1 or I'm going to go 2 for 2. If that doesn't translate into a different country, wins and losses. So I'm 2 wins, 1 loss on this, where I had 1 crash when I was trying to fly something through there. And funny enough, it was an actual Sabre Raven. Somebody lent me, but they were a good sport about it. Their friend, and it worked out okay. It was just a little sheepish situation. This was a few patches ago. So I had a theory that the Sabre Raven was going to work. And as you can see, this more sporty, drag strippy version of the Sabre Raven flew with passing colors. It is very easy to maneuver this in small turns, but when you start doing hard turns, it starts bleeding speed, and you can tell that main thruster's kind of dragging you around. So you need to like lower your speed a bit, make the turn, and then throw it around. You can see me throwing it in the gear mode. I'm trying to show that you can land this in some non-opportune locations. So it's perfect for a place like Microtech, where you can hit the commons or something like that in New Babbage and land there, on the ramp, and not be one of those people that has the ship flipped over or damaged or something like that. You can absolutely just land this thing, no problem. I do like that it has so much thrust on demand that you can kind of like do micro maneuvers, which is kind of neat. I kind of had a lot of fun doing this. And I think with a racing ship, that's important for a lot of players, especially those of us who don't race all the time. Having it make it just that much more fun to use the ship makes it more usable. I am sure when this is a buy-in game, I probably will pick it up again, even if I do CCU it probably late this year at IAE or into next year, maybe at Invictus at latest. You can see again me testing the landing gear, showing it's not an opportune location. There's multiple materials I'm landing on. Relatively flat, sure, but it's just showing that it can land quite well at these locations. So if you really had your heart set on having some kind of Sabre Raven, as long as you're in a safe location, this is not a bad pick. It's a fun ship to fly, and especially once again, if it's a buy-in game and it's not tying up, an LTI or a 10-year insurance, purchased on the store type slot on your ship list. If you have a few ships, um, it's not bad at all. Yeah, it's not also that bad. If you're into racing or you're into something like that, I could see it definitely being a great ship. Or if you just want that, maybe into one more ship for your collection. I often talk, well, not often, but a few times I've talked with folks that have a Kraken or an Idris or something, and they're looking for like a fun ship to put on their list, so to speak. And lately, one of the things I've been encouraging people to look at is the Liberator, and that's another ship that could fit, 2 of these sitting on top of its deck, on its top deck. So it's absolutely, you could have these for races and such like that. I'm not encouraging anybody to buy 2 of these dang things, but hey, it's one more ship in the arsenal. And if you're in the CCU game, it's kind of a no-brainer. Any Warbond CCU, if you can even get fun with it for a while, as long as it's not going to price you out of something else you wanted. Like if your heart's set on, I want I want a Cuddy blue, or I want a Cuddy red as a part of my fleet or support of my org, this is probably not a good idea, because then it would bump you out of that kind of price point, or matching that price point, start edging you out of it. So, that's kind of what I see it also of, is like the 170 USD war bond is really pushing you up. And then you have the 185 effective credit level that it's going to equal. That's going to ice you out of a lot of CCU paths at the lower point, like in that like starting to be very useful advanced starters, the start of the multi-crew ships. So one of the other things that I noticed about this vessel is that it has a pretty limited quantum tank. It does have quantum. You can move yourself across the whole system, and you have to use a midpoint though. So basically, one of the interesting things about the way the quantum works on this First of all, you're sporting a size 1 quantum drive. You're not going to be moving anywhere incredibly fast because you have to go to halfway across the system, hit a midpoint, refuel your quantum tank, and then go again. You can't do it all in one fell swoop. You can't do it, in an effective, quick manner. So that is worth noting for a ship of this size, and that is more important in Pyro. So you'll note that there's like some acceleration where you will feel like a jolt, and that's common in these type of racing ships. See, like that. If you suddenly go slow, you're going to feel it. If you switch master modes, you're going to feel it. It's going to throw you through a little bit of a jolt there. And it is worth mentioning that that's an issue. You can see the decoys and noise being tested. A little bit of a light show. Be fun for racing if you want to celebrate a win, or if you're just showing off to your friends. But more importantly, they work. They're functional. There is things that are able to be used in SCM guns. As with any other ship, it is slower in this mode. So you do make a pretty big, significant jump by deciding to make that jump over to that system. Now, as I mentioned, there is a limitation where you can't just go across the system in a single jump. I don't just say these things, I test them. So you can note that you would have to take a midpoint. You can see here. And to be fair, as Toast gleefully points out to me, Microtech is not in the most centralized position in the system. So if you lived in, let's say Hurston in Lorville, or on Crusader, you would be able to get to more places without a midpoint, but it is considerable amount of positions, and this has implications for Pyro. You would need to have multiple refueling locations if you were trying to transit across that system of Pyro. Even though they have made efforts to make it feel smaller, it's still a huge system. And not all refueling positions will be friendly. And a ship that doesn't even have weapons is going to be a pinata to NPC and to player alike. So you would have to rely on your speed to get away, which means you wouldn't have any shields. So you just have to hope they don't connect and your decoys and your noise work well enough to keep the missiles off your back while you're trying to run away at 1448 meters a second. And I don't know how that's going to work out for you. I just don't know. I will say there's ships that are pretty damn quick in this game, and this ship is going to be in a lot of trouble, a lot of hot water really quickly, especially if it gets caught unaware or they get close enough to get some damage on target. So yeah, so this is a one crew ship that is it's just a seat. I compared it to the 350R. I know it's not exactly a fair fight because the 350R has services, but it is a cheaper ship with the ability to log out, with the ability to have hygiene, with some storage capacity, where this thing really isn't built for any of that. It does have the ability to scan. It does have a size 1 radar. I want to make sure I mention that. And, earlier I mentioned it has one size 1 power plant. I later found out it has two size 1 power plants. And that is probably more for the components and engineering systems update. It's highly likely we're theory crafting that basically all ships will have, of this size, would have 2 size 1 power plants to meet the requirements of the new engineering system. So don't get too excited about that. But it is worth mentioning. So this is part of the game. I wanted to point out how fast this thing goes. I can't stress that enough. It is quick. It is quick, but you can feel it the minute you go slow, when you switch master modes, when you split the gears down. If you have that setting on, it will go slow, but you will feel it. It is a very intense ship to fly. It is fun to fly. I'm making it sound boring the way I do it monotone a little bit here, but I hope that emphasis is getting across. And as a reminder, with all these type of videos, if you have certain topics you want covered, don't be afraid to use the chapters below, jump around, and cover them, because I try to do detail as well as topics spread out a little bit, to give them the breathing room they need. You can see the shields rapidly deploy because we're talking about size 1 shields. They tend to recharge very quickly. They're not going to be on 100% the first second, but they are pretty quick. So if you haven't used master modes in a while on a ship of this size, in the guns mode, they are pretty impressive. And you can see I'm just trying to beat up the ship and just really put it through its paces over and over again. You can keep changing modes, and it's not going to impact anything other than your cruise control icon goes up and down the little bar on the left, noting how fast you can go. And yeah, it's almost a detriment. It's almost a detriment that the master modes aren't simplified on a racing vessel that has no weapon systems. I kind of wish it was just like, look, it can't even do offensive operations. I wish it could just have 2 master modes, and just that's it or something. Just simplify it. Give it, maybe even consider giving it shields in its quantum mode, its nav modes. Maybe consider that, for scan and quantum and all that in the nav modes. Why not? Why not? It's not going to change anything if it was, and it might give it a tiny little bit of extra buffer and more of an interesting space. But anyway, back to topic. This is how it performs in Atmo in the daylight. I know how some folks want to see that action and see how it really goes through its setup. And also, more importantly, this is in an area that's considered pretty dangerous. I'm flying extremely low in an area where if I hit one of these peaks, it's over, right? And the ship performs very well. It's very stable. It is a joy to fly this thing. And as long as you're not making massive sweeping turns, it really enjoys itself. It likes going fast. It wants to be fast. It doesn't care for going super slow. But it can land in not precision, but it can, because of those nice big landing gears, it can really tap down. And once again, I could see this thing as almost like a little mini, I'm going to go visit my buddies at the nearby outpost, and I'm coming from my outpost type thing in the future. We don't know how far apart. We know the size of the land claims is measured in kilometers, and that's miles across, right? We know they're huge, but we just don't know how far. Can you build at the edge of your land claim, and they build at the edge of their land claim, so you can walk to each other, or do you need a vehicle or a ship to be able to comfortably move back and forth between each others, especially with org mates? You can note we consumed over 25% hydrogen fuel just doing these exercises, and this is all in the span of maybe a half hour of flying tops, if that. And a lot of it's drifting in no Atmo, out in the void, out in the black, as they would say in expanse terms. So you take that what you will. With a racing ship, I think it's anticipated. You can see that large metal strut in the center top blocking the view of the flame thrusters for some reason. Maybe this ship at one point was viewed to be like a stealth ship. Now here's a banking turn, for example, trying to slow down, trying to get it going, and you can just see the ship just straining to get there. But if you do the spin where you do not a 180, but you start doing an angled spin and apply some main thruster with the extra thrust, you should be able to get in there. And then once you're on a trajectory and you kind of have a plot plan to where you want to go, this ship's fine. And I'm not the greatest pilot of these type of ships. I spend a lot of my time. Probably the smallest ship as my daily driver is my Connie Phoenix, for example. I tend to be on multi-cruise ships, or at least that's what the CIG wishes they were. So it is what it is. But I thought this would be a fun place to end this video, is with a crew of Kopions. And that's not a player locking me up or an NPC locking me up. That's actually the Kopions acknowledging me and locking onto me, so to speak. They have their own little AIs in their little heads that make them think through what they're supposed to do with that situation. But just to be safe, I put it in guns mode, so I had my shields. Who knows? Maybe they'll gnaw on the landing gears. But you just hear that powerful engine turning off, and the power plant throwing it around. But sometimes I think the game, when you simplify it, you just kind of do an experience. it sometimes gets better. And a ship like this, if you want to go do the fun things and run around, you can do that in any ship. But a ship with a nice big cockpit glass to help you find things to go check out, and it's fast, maneuverable, nimble. You know other players or know this thing isn't going to attack them. You can kind of hang out and have a good time. It's not a bad ship to do it in. Thank you to my long-term subscribers. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. I want to thank you all for being here for 2,500 views, 2,500 subscribers. I'm going to leave that little bit in. Y'all have a wonderful 3.24.